"Attack!" the officer shouted, but the K9 didn't move. The powerful German Shepherd stood still, staring into the trembling old man's eyes. What happened next silenced the crowd and broke every heart on the scene, and it changed everyone who witnessed it forever. It started like any ordinary patrol. A call came in just after noon. Suspicious man near the playground. Officers were dispatched immediately. When they arrived, they found him. An elderly man, alone on a park bench near the swings, clutching an old duffel bag. Kids played nearby, parents watched cautiously. He wasn't doing anything threatening, just sitting, quiet, staring at the grass. But something about him raised alarm. His clothes were worn. His expression was distant. One officer asked him to stand and show what was in the bag. The man struggled to rise. His knees shook. He winced and held his side. I'm just resting," he said, voice trembling. But the officers weren't convinced. Another unit was called in for backup, this one with a K9. Within minutes, a patrol SUV arrived. The doors opened, and a powerful German Shepherd stepped out, ready for command. The old man lifted his hand slowly, trying to ease the tension, but the officers' voices grew sharper. "Show us what's in the bag!" one barked. The duffel sat at his feet, untouched. The man tried to speak, but words failed him. More children were ushered away from the playground. One officer placed his hand on his holster. Another radioed dispatch. Then came the K9 officer, tall and stern, gripping the leash of the German Shepherd who stood alert beside him. "Last warning, sir," the K9 officer shouted. "Comply now." When the old man hesitated, not from defiance but from fear, the command came loud and clear. "K9, go! Get him!" The German Shepherd lunged forward, muscles rippling, eyes locked. Bystanders gasped, but just before contact, something unexpected happened. The dog didn't bite. He stopped, and then he whined. Everyone stood frozen. The powerful K9 had surged forward with precision, but instead of attacking, he skidded to a halt just feet from the old man. His ears perked. His growl faded into a confused whimper. He sniffed the air, then slowly tilted his head. The old man, trembling, whispered something barely audible. "Shadow?" At the sound of that name, the dog backed up slightly, ears twitching. He let out another low whine, longer this time. His tail, once stiff with aggression, started to lower, then gave a faint wag. The K9 officer yanked on the leash. "What's wrong with him?" But Shadow wouldn't budge. Instead of aggression, there was recognition. Something in this frail, forgotten man had stirred a memory buried deep in the dog's mind. This wasn't just hesitation, this was familiarity and heartbreak. The old man slowly reached out a trembling hand, not afraid, not uncertain, just hopeful. "Shadow," he said again, tears forming in his eyes. "It's me. It's Frank." The German Shepherd's body stiffened for a moment. Then, like something inside him clicked, he stepped forward cautiously, sniffing the man's coat. His nose brushed Frank's trembling fingers. And then, he leaned in. Gasps echoed around the park as the fierce K9 sat down and rested his head gently on the man's lap. Frank broke down. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I thought they said you didn't make it, that you were gone." Officers stared, stunned. The K9 officer loosened his grip, eyes wide in disbelief. Shadow, the same dog trained for discipline, obedience, and combat, was now whimpering like a puppy, nuzzling the man who had once raised him. One officer quietly called in dispatch, requesting background checks on both the dog and the man. Minutes later, the truth came spilling out. Franklin Ward, retired military K9 handler, had been listed as missing and presumed dead after a bombing overseas 6 years ago. His entire unit was wiped out. Or so they thought. Frank had survived but suffered traumatic brain injury and partial memory loss. With no ID and no records, he'd fallen through the cracks, homeless, forgotten. Meanwhile, his K9, Shadow, had been recovered separately, reassigned, and retrained for local law enforcement. No one had ever connected them. Until now. Officers lowered their weapons. The tension dissolved. Some backed away quietly, hands over their mouths in shock. Others stood motionless, witnessing something far greater than protocol. The dog they'd sent to subdue a stranger had just found the only person who ever truly meant home. Frank sat cross-legged on the grass, tears streaking down his weathered face as he stroked Shadow's fur. The once vicious K9 lay curled against him like a child returning home after being lost for years. Neither moved quickly. They didn't need to. Time had frozen around them. Flashbacks hit Frank in waves, training drills in the desert, night patrols under foreign stars, whispered commands that Shadow always followed. He remembered the way Shadow would sleep beside him in the bunker, alert even in dreams. He remembered saving him from shrapnel. He remembered calling his name in the smoke before blacking out. Shadow remembered too. He licked Frank's trembling hands and let out a low, familiar huff, like the exhale of a soldier finally off duty. Frank laughed and cried all at once. "You didn't forget me, after all this time." And somehow, neither did the dog. Not for a second. By now, a crowd had gathered at the edge of the park, parents, children, joggers, even people from nearby shops. Most had seen the standoff begin with fear. Now, they were witnessing something none of them would ever forget. Phones were raised, recording the scene, as Shadow lay protectively beside Frank. Tears rolled down strangers' faces. One little boy whispered, "That dog remembers him." A woman sobbed quietly into her hands. The K9 officer, still holding the leash loosely, finally let go. "He's not my dog," he said softly. "Not anymore." Within hours, the videos went viral. Headlines appeared everywhere. "The dog who remembered." K9 reunites with long-lost handler in emotional park moment. It wasn't just about a dog disobeying a command. It was about loyalty that time, trauma, and training could never erase. In a world full of orders, Shadow had chosen love, and the world wept with him. Later that day, officials arrived, supervisors, a city attorney, even the department's K9 coordinator. The question was simple but heavy. What would happen next? Technically, Shadow was still an active service dog. He had responsibilities, protocols, a badge. But after what everyone had witnessed, rules began to feel small. The K9 officer stepped forward. He's made his choice, and frankly, so have we. Frank, seated beside Shadow on a blanket brought by a kind stranger, looked up, worried. "You're not taking him, are you?" The commander knelt beside them, voice steady. "No, sir. We're bringing him home." Cheers erupted from the small crowd. Shadow wagged his tail gently as if understanding. Frank lowered his head and rested it against his best friend's. A decision had been made, not on paper, but in hearts. For once, policy followed compassion. And this time, the system finally got it right. Weeks later, Frank and Shadow moved into a quiet veteran-assisted living community on the edge of town. The home wasn't fancy, but it had everything they needed: warm meals, quiet mornings, and a small yard where Shadow could stretch his legs. Frank had his first checkup in years. Shadow got a new collar, with his original name engraved beneath the badge. They slept better than they had in ages, together, side by side, just like before. The staff adored them. Kids from the neighborhood stopped by to bring treats. Veterans shared stories they hadn't told in years, inspired by Frank's strength and Shadow's loyalty. No one called them homeless anymore. No one saw a broken old man and a dangerous K9. They saw two survivors, two brothers in arms, two hearts that had found their way home, not through orders or missions, but through love that never forgot.